Between 1999 and 2015, a name began appearing in police files across Europe, London, Paris, Geneva, Monaco, and cities far beyond the continent. The crimes were fast, audacious, and incredibly expensive. In roughly 16 years, the people linked to this name were believed to have carried out around 380 armed jewelry robberies. The estimated value of the stolen goods was more than 334 million euros. The thieves could appear in broad daylight, create a few moments of chaos, take jewelry worth millions, and disappear before most witnesses fully understood what had happened. Police hunted them across national borders. Newspapers described their robberies like scenes from a movie, and the public gave them a name that would become famous around the world, the Pink Panthers. But behind that name was not one ordinary gang. There was no single headquarters controlling every crime, no official membership list, and no permanent team the police could simply identify and arrest. There was a network. People entered it, worked together, separated, and sometimes reunited in another country under different names. That made the Pink Panthers appear to be everywhere. Whenever investigators believed they were getting close, another team could appear in another city, a different face, a different passport, a different target. For years, this created the legend of criminals who were always one step ahead. But this is not a story about the perfect crime. It is a story about people who believed one final robbery would finally make them free, and about Rajko Čaušević, a man who claimed he had been an important part of that world, a man who moved through luxury hotels, exclusive jewelry stores, and prisons across Europe, only to end up with almost nothing. Chapter 1. Who were the Pink Panthers? When people hear the name Pink Panthers, they often imagine a single, perfectly organized criminal empire, a clear hierarchy, a powerful leader, and dozens of members following one master plan. The reality was far more complicated. Police used the name for a wider network of jewelry thieves, many of whom came from countries of the former Yugoslavia. Some teams knew one another, some shared contacts, some used similar methods, and some may never have met most of the people the media placed under the same label. That loose structure created an enormous problem for investigators. With a traditional gang, arresting one group can lead police toward the leader, the money, and the rest of the organization. With the Pink Panthers, stopping one team did not necessarily stop another. While detectives in one country were building a case, a new robbery could take place hundreds of miles away. The people behind it might use different documents, live in different cities, and have no obvious connection to the first group. This created the impression of one enormous organization capable of coordinating crimes across the world. And the more famous the name became, the more attention every new case received. The media saw elegant criminals, powerful cars, and missing diamonds. Police saw international arrest warrants, false identities, terrified employees, and investigations that crossed borders. The public saw a legend, but the people inside that legend often lived far less glamorous lives than the headlines suggested. When the cameras were gone, what remained was suspicion, hiding, and the constant fear that someone, somewhere, would make the mistake that connected everything. Chapter 2. Rajko. Čaušević did not grow up believing he would become part of Europe's most famous network of jewelry thieves. His childhood was unstable, and his family life was marked by serious problems. While still a teenager, he left home and went abroad. He had no education that could easily open important doors. He had no money, and he had no reliable plan. He entered a world where he had to learn quickly who could be trusted and how to survive. Then he discovered something dangerous. In a few minutes, theft could produce what other people worked months to earn. At first, the crimes were smaller: petty theft, running from the police, leaving home, returning, and then leaving again. There were no famous jewelry stores yet, no enormous amounts of money, and no name that would one day fill newspaper pages. But each time Rajko escaped serious consequences, the boundary moved. What seemed too dangerous yesterday began to look possible tomorrow. The targets grew larger, the decisions became bolder, and an ordinary life became less attractive. This is one of the traps of crime. The first success rarely gives a person freedom. More often, it convinces them that next time they can take even more. Rajko later spoke like someone who understood that cycle well. Fast money creates a powerful feeling, but the feeling does not last. When the money disappears, the person does not simply return to the beginning. Now he remembers the luxury, the status, and the moment when he believed the normal rules no longer applied to him. So the next target has to be bigger, and every step forward makes the path back more difficult. Chapter 3. A system without a center. The Pink Panthers did not have one office, one official leader, or a card proving that someone belonged to the group. They operated as smaller teams connected by personal relationships, trust, and shared contacts. People came and went. One team might appear in France, another might operate in Italy, Switzerland, Germany, or the United Kingdom. When police began connecting faces and identities in one country, the criminals could change their surroundings, their documents, or the members of the team. In that world, reputation had enormous value. It was not enough to appear brave. You had to convince the people around you that you would not panic, talk to the police, or disappear with someone else's money. But trust built inside a criminal network has one serious weakness. Everyone knows that the people around them are willing to break rules, so nobody can trust anyone completely. After a successful robbery, someone had to control the stolen goods, someone had to connect those goods to money, and someone had to decide how the money would be divided. Every additional person in that chain created another opportunity for a mistake, a betrayal, or an arrest. This was why the network was both strong and unstable. It had no single center that police could destroy, but it also had no structure that could fully protect the people inside it. Years later, Rajko claimed that one of their most important rules was to avoid hurting people. That claim was important to the way he described himself. It allowed him to draw a line between a thief and someone he considered truly violent. But law enforcement records connected the wider network to many armed robberies, and that revealed the distance between the legend and reality. In the story some criminals told about themselves. They were disciplined professionals. To the workers, witnesses, and investigators involved, they were members of a dangerous international network whose crimes left fear and enormous damage behind. Chapter 4: The Name That Created a Legend. Their famous nickname began after a robbery in London. Police found a stolen diamond hidden inside a container of cosmetic cream. The hiding place reminded investigators of a scene from the movie, The Return of the Pink Panther. The name stayed. Then it began to create a story of its own. Every spectacular new robbery made the Pink Panthers more famous. Journalists loved writing about sharply dressed criminals, luxury cars, expensive hotels, and diamonds worth millions. To readers, it sounded like a film, and to the criminals, that attention could create the feeling that they were no longer ordinary thieves. They were part of something historic, something larger than themselves. That was one of the most dangerous parts of the legend. When crime begins to look like entertainment, it becomes easy to forget what it leaves behind. The fear of the people caught in the robbery, the families waiting through years of imprisonment, the friends who never returned, and a life in which every unexpected knock at the door might be the police. The name Pink Panthers may have created the image of a larger and more unified organization than truly existed, but once the legend was created, everyone had to live with it. Police faced greater pressure to stop them. The media wanted an even more dramatic story, and new criminals could see the name as something they wanted to join. The legend did not simply describe the network, it helped the network grow in the public imagination. Chapter 5: The Stakes Keep Rising. The most famous Pink Panther crimes were not random decisions made in a single moment. They were preceded by preparation, movement, and attempts to predict what could go wrong, but no plan could remove the risk. The public usually saw only a few seconds of security footage, masked figures, broken glass, confusion, then an escape. Because everything happened so quickly, it could look simple, almost precise. But the part that did not appear on camera was more important. Stolen jewelry was not the same as money. Individual pieces could be recognized. Their full value was almost impossible for the thieves to receive. And the newspaper estimate was not the amount the group could divide afterward. Other people demanded a share. Money disappeared through travel, lawyers, hiding, and the expensive lifestyle that followed. The reward became smaller, but the legal risk stayed enormous. That pushed the targets higher. If someone had taken hundreds of thousands once, the next goal became 1,000,000. If a team escaped in one city, they believed they could repeat it in another. Confidence grew faster than caution. Every success seemed to prove they were smarter than the system chasing them. But every new crime also created more evidence, more cameras, more journeys, more witnesses, more people who knew something, and more opportunities for one small mistake to connect everything else. The Pink Panthers appeared strongest immediately after a successful robbery. In reality, that was often the moment when the number of risks multiplied. Chapter 6: The Money That Was Never Enough. After a successful job, it could feel as if the money would never disappear. Luxury hotels, expensive restaurants, international travel, designer clothes, and powerful cars that told everyone they had made it. People who had once lived without security could suddenly afford almost anything they wanted. But money gained through crime has a strange quality. It arrives quickly, so it is often spent as if it will return just as quickly. A man who does not know when he will be arrested does not make a calm plan for the next 10 years. He lives as if everything has to happen now. Large amounts disappeared into luxury, destructive habits, and reckless decisions. Some went to the people who turned stolen goods into cash. Some disappeared into lawyers, travel, and life on the run. And after several months, a person who once had enough money to stop stealing forever could begin thinking about another target, not because there was no possible exit, but because he had become used to the risk, the status, and the feeling that ordinary life was too small. That created a cycle: robbery, money, luxury, waste, then another robbery. Every time, they could promise themselves it would be the final job. But the final job always became the reason for the next one, because if it worked before, why would it not work again? The question sounded logical, until the answer arrived as an arrest, a betrayal, or a tragedy. Chapter 7. When the plan stops mattering. Rajko believed that risk could be controlled. If the plan was good enough, if everyone remained disciplined, and if everything ended quickly, then nobody would be seriously hurt. That belief protected the image he had of himself. It was easier to live with his choices if he could say that he was a professional who only took jewelry. But crime cannot be completely controlled. It takes only one incorrect judgment, one unexpected reaction, 1 second of panic. During one operation, Rajko's friend lost his life. Suddenly, the value of the jewelry no longer mattered. It did not matter how intelligent the plan had seemed. It did not matter who had made the first mistake. The man who left with them did not return. That was where the legend of the Pink Panthers collided with reality. For years, some members of the network wanted to believe they controlled every important detail, but that moment showed there was no such thing as a harmless armed robbery. Even when nobody intends a tragedy, the danger is present from the beginning. And when something irreversible happens, money cannot repair it. It can be spent, it can be hidden, it can become the reason for another crime, but it cannot erase the decisions that led to that moment. For Rajko, the cost was no longer an abstract possibility. It had a name. It was someone he knew. And still, even consequences that serious were not always enough to break the cycle. Chapter 8. Police connect the dots. While the Pink Panthers moved between cities and countries, investigators spent years collecting their traces. At first, every robbery could look like a separate case. One happened in London, another in Paris, a third in a wealthy tourist destination hundreds of miles away. But police began noticing patterns, the kinds of targets, the speed of the crimes, faces that appeared under different names, vehicles and documents connected to people who had already attracted attention. One country had security footage, another had a fingerprint or a photograph, a third knew the true name of someone using a false identity elsewhere. Individually, these pieces were not always enough, but when police forces began sharing information, the picture became clearer. Interpol and national investigators connected cases that had once remained in separate files. The borders that had helped the criminals disappear started becoming places where they could be recognized. Every crossing created data. Every new camera added another image. Every arrest gave investigators another chance to learn how different people were connected. Police did not need to solve the entire network at once. They only needed one weak link, a document, a photograph, a known contact, or a person who no longer wanted to remain silent. The network had been powerful because it had so many moving parts. Now that same quality became its weakness. Every moving part could leave a trail toward another. Chapter 9. Arrests did not mean the end. One by one, people linked to the Pink Panthers entered prisons across Europe. But even major arrests did not immediately stop the robberies. When one team disappeared, another could still operate. When an experienced member was convicted, someone younger could be attracted by the money and the reputation. This was why the fight against the network did not look like the destruction of one criminal organization. It was more like the slow closing of dozens of smaller circles. Rajko served prison sentences in several countries. Every time he was released, he had an opportunity to stop. He could accept that the cost had become greater than any possible reward. But the same thought kept returning. One more job. Then it would finally be over. That promise is dangerous because it sounds like an exit plan. The person does not tell himself he is choosing more years of crime. He tells himself he is choosing one final opportunity. But a new robbery means new contacts. a new investigation, and another chance for everything to go wrong. Once a person enters the same circle again, leaving becomes even harder. Prison should have been the clearest possible warning, but for some people, it only connected old stories to new contacts. That allowed the legend to keep attracting those who saw the millions, but did not see the years lost behind locked doors. Chapter 10. The Man Behind the Legend. When Rajko appeared in front of cameras years later, he no longer looked like a man who had lived among millions. He spoke about the money he had wasted, the prisons he had passed through, the people he had lost, and a life that looked nothing like the future he imagined when he first